Picture in your mind your local arcade. Maybe you go there a lot, or maybe you only visit sometimes. You can probably imagine the various sounds coming from the cabinets, the roar of the engines emanating from the big racing game, and the clattering of sticks and buttons as other players attempt various challenges. Where do you gravitate towards? Do you crave a pedal and steering wheel? Do you seek a challenge from one of the fighting games? Is there a classic you come to visit, like an old friend? Whatever your reason for being here in the arcade, I want you to think for a moment. Does this arcade have any pinball tables? And if so, are you going to play them? For a long while, I used to be deep in the anti-pinball camp. But early in my life, and now later in life, I have a deep love for pinball. As a child, my family used to go to the McDivot's Sports Bar in West Chase, Florida. Young me didn't care too much for the food, although I will contend they had the best curly fries any sports bar ever served. No, there were two reasons I liked being there. The first was I got to pet the jackalope in the waiting area. The second was their arcade. It was small, but packed with some interesting finds. They had a monkey ball cabinet, the original one with the banana joystick, and I'm pretty sure they also had Cruisin' Exotica. I think at one point they may have even had a Mega Man Power Battles arcade cabinet, although that could have been another sports bar. Yet the thing that drew my attention the most was the Simpsons pinball table. Over and over, quarter after quarter, I'd keep playing this game while I waited for dinner to arrive. My mom and grandparents would talk about boring adult things at the table. Meanwhile, I was rolling steel balls through Springfield. My love for pinball wasn't steadfast, though. We all do things as teenagers that embarrass us as adults, and my great shame was that I would frequently badmouth pinball. It was no skill, all luck, I would say. It's a waste of time. No one's good at pinball. I didn't mean those things. I was just a stupid kid who hadn't even discovered estrogen yet. In my adulthood, I came back to pinball, but perhaps not through the route you might expect. It wasn't a fateful counter in an arcade. We didn't happen to see each other from across the bar while I was in town visiting my parents. No, it was through something else I love dearly: video games. Fun fact about this channel. Before I decided on the Miss Fox moniker, I once had an idea for a series called Down the Drain Reviews, a recurring video series where I'd go over my thoughts on pinball video games. This was inspired by my more recent affinity and obsession with pinball video games. These pinball games brought me back into pinball's loving arms, and now that I'm older, I have a much deeper appreciation for it. Whenever I go to arcades, I look for their pinball tables. I love these machines so much more than I ever could before. It's this beautiful, elegant game between myself and physics, and the game is facilitated by these intricate, alluring mechanisms. I have a deep desire for a good table, the instantaneous snap of the flippers when I press the buttons, the light thudding and shaking as the pop bumpers and pistons play the song written in Newton's third law, the resistance of pulling back the plunger, followed by a satisfying release. My thoughts, I must confess, verge on dirty. What can I say? There's certain ways a pinball table can satisfy me that people just can't replicate. Will I regret saying these things if my channel gets popular? Maybe, or maybe I'm simply pre-curating the fan art I receive. And now that I've separated out the weaklings from my audience, I'd like to revisit the pinball game review idea I mentioned earlier. As much as I love pinball, sometimes she's just too fast for me. My reaction timing isn't always the best, nor is my ball control. But just like how racing games can allow you to enjoy exciting and fantastical races without a driver's license, pinball video games can provide a softer entry point into the game and produce tables and gameplay that aren't necessarily bound by the laws of physics and matter. I don't think I can really start a whole down the drain series like I'd initially planned, but I'd like to take some time to talk in this video about a few pinball games that I really love. The Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS seem to be a haven for pinball video games. There's plenty of options like the Pinball of the Dead, Sonic Pinball Party, Flipper Critters, Pac-Man Pinball Advance, and the excellent Metroid Prime Pinball. The one I view as the standout, though, is Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. This is a sequel to Pokemon Pinball on the Game Boy Color. While the original was good in concept, the Game Boy Color just wasn't able to take on a full load from a pinball physics system, and so the cracks started to show. By contrast, the Game Boy Advance was the first handheld which could enthusiastically receive a full thrust from my dear mistress, pinball. With a physics system that actually works, Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire are able to properly deliver on the Pokemon Pinball dream. The concept is deceptively simple. It's a pinball game where you catch Pokemon. But that gameplay loop of catching and evolving Pokemon is incredible. The goal of filling out your Pokédex is an incredible motivator for learning ball control, a skill you'll need if you want to meet all the conditions necessary to activate capture and evolution minigames. The aesthetic work is also amazing. Each table is teeming with life as Pokemon perform the various functions necessary to run the game. And if you keep your run going long enough, if you catch and evolve enough Pokemon, you open up minigame tables, eventually leading you to face off against the legendary Pokemon of the Hoenn region. And yes, these minigames are the only way to capture Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza, so you have to get good at them. The only real complaint I can lobby against this game is screen real estate, which was going to be a difficult factor in any handheld pinball game. Unfortunately, the scale necessary to keep elements visible on the Game Boy Advance without horizontal scrolling means that your flippers are fairly small, which makes ball trajectory harder to gauge. I wish the developers had opted to put a little extra friction on the flippers to slow the ball down. That's a quality of life feature I appreciate in most modern pinball video games. As I mentioned in my last video, I have a design document tucked away in my computer for a Pokemon Pinball revival. I really do wish the series had continued. Modern screen resolutions, even in handheld form, have greatly improved in the past 2 decades. And I think there's a lot of potential in a Pokemon Pinball Scarlet and Violet that could be realized without having to make everything so tiny. I'm not moving off the Game Boy Advance quite yet, because there's another pinball game I want to specifically cover. Mario Pinball Land, in many ways, suffers from the same screen issues as Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire. They do try to rectify this by making every table fit on a single screen, but this does leave things feeling a bit homogeneous and cramped. They also seem to have shot themselves in the foot by going for a pre-rendered pseudo-3D style and perspective, which is always going to yield mixed results. Ball control is also horrendous, as they made Mario, the ball, just a little too bouncy and the flippers a little too strong. So why am I talking about this one? It's not the most well-known Mario release of 2004. Heck, it's definitely not even the strongest pinball release on the Game Boy Advance. Well, what it lacks in execution, it makes up for in concept. Mario Pinball Land asks a simple question. What if Super Mario 64 was a pinball game? And that idea is intriguing enough to hook me for the entire fucking adventure. I really love the aesthetic of roaming around through Mario worlds collecting stars as a pinball. And so I'm pretty strong in my belief that this game is due for a remake. Fucking Mario vs. Donkey Kong got a remake when it absolutely didn't need one. Mario vs. Donkey Kong was good enough on its own, and aesthetically well executed, so a full remake on Switch with 3D assets just seems like overkill. And sadly, this game, Mario Pinball Land, languishes in obscurity, desperately needing that remake treatment so it can finally be the 3D Mario pinball game I deserve. Nintendo, please. I know you're listening. I need this remake. I'll buy 10 fucking copies of this game if it'll convince you to give me my Mario pinball fix. Let's move away from the Game Boy Advance so we can finally talk about some more modern pinball games. To start, I want to showcase Rollers of the Realm, a 3D pinball action game with RPG elements. This right here, this is my shit. I've had the corny voice lines from this game stuck in my head for years. Rollers of the Realm takes a solidly built pinball engine and adds just the right amount of spice to make it something special. Your pinball is a character, and in fact, you earn extra balls whenever you recruit new characters to your party, meaning as your party grows, you gain extra attempts for each run. Every character has a unique mix of stats, passive effects, and a special ability. The pinball tables and simulation here are choice, and as a way to sell the pinballs as characters, they all have their own voice lines. Holding left or right on the control stick exerts a little directional influence in the ball's trajectory. When you're on the plunger, or if you're cradling the ball, you're able to swap out your character, switching your pinball and abilities on the fly. The enemies on the table aren't just for show either. Give them long enough and they'll start attacking the flippers. As they take on damage, the flippers break and become shorter, making it harder to make precise shots or even cradle the ball to stop it. You either have to prioritize health pickups to keep the action going, or switch to your healer pinball to refresh your health from time to time. Honestly, I really fuck with this game, and I was really excited to see that Phantom Compass, the game's developer, currently have a sequel in the works. There's a free demo for both Rollers of the Realm and Rollers of the Realm Reunion on Steam, so why not give them a shot? If you like it, I can tell you the first game is well worth a purchase, and you should definitely wishlist the sequel on Steam. When it does come time for Reunion to do its marketing push, I'd love to be part of it. So if anyone at Phantom Compass is listening, I'll gladly take a review code to talk about the game when it launches. The next game I want to talk about is Yoku's Island Express. This game moves us from a pinball RPG to a pinball Metroidvania. It sounds like the kind of genre mix that just isn't possible, but Villa Gorilla pulled it off with grace. There's a whole big world to get lost in, and it's navigated almost exclusively through pinball physics. As you explore the map, you'll meet all kinds of colorful characters who will tell you about the island or point you towards one of your objectives. The physics are superb and buttery smooth, making the table sections snappy and frenetic. Interestingly, draining your ball doesn't incur much of a penalty, just taking away some of the fruit you've collected. This helps to keep the game feeling relaxed, and even when a section is tough, there's not a lot of consequence or pressure for failing. You don't have to worry about dying and redoing a whole big section, just shoot and try again. Honestly, what brings the game together is its gorgeous painted art style. The artwork is just so vibrant and bright, making it a joy to experience from start to finish. Initially, I was only supposed to record about 30 minutes or so of gameplay as B-roll for this part of the video, but I was just so taken in by the gameplay and atmosphere that my recording time came in at 4 hours. If you haven't played this game before, I highly recommend it. It was a perfect game to play on my Switch during a vacation several years ago, and recording footage for this video had me extremely tempted to play it to 100% completion a second time. Finally on my list is Zombie Rollers, a fairly unique pinball roguelike game. If you've played character-based roguelite games before, the non-pinball mechanics should be incredibly familiar. The character you pick gets dropped into a procedurally generated map, and you choose between events and encounters in order to both progress to the end and build up your level and resources. Along the way, you'll pick up trinkets and abilities that adjust to gameplay and have a variety of effects. Slay the Spire does this for collectible card games, and Zombie Rollers does this for pinball. Zombie Rollers changes up the pinball physics in order to balance things more towards the player's favor. Flipper friction is incredibly high, slowing the pinball down to a crawl as soon as it touches the flippers. There's also very little space between the left and right flippers on the bottom, making draining the ball an incredibly rare occurrence. However, the game isn't a cakewalk just because you can't drain the ball. The main challenge of the game comes not from ball control, but instead from wiping out all of the enemies. In place of lives, you have a health bar. Draining the ball takes away health, and so can the various zombies on the field. If a zombie comes up and punches your flipper, or if a magic zombie hits it with a ranged attack, your health will start chipping away. To deal with the overwhelming hordes of zombies trying to take you down, you'll need to utilize ball attributes and skills. Ball skills are abilities that activate when you press a button. These are often special attacks like a big explosion or a wall of fire, but they can be more strategic as well, like a skill that recharges energy. With a full arsenal, you'll have a selection of 4 skills comprised of 3 basic skills and 1 ultimate skill. Ball attributes are essentially passive effects on the ball that determine what happens if the pinball makes contact with the zombie. Your first equipped attribute also has a cast, or in essence, a 5th ball skill. You'll also be able to occasionally pick up trinkets. Some of them have passive abilities similar to ball attributes, and other times they'll affect attributes like your stats or the rewards you pick up. The game is definitely tailored to a pick up and play mentality. Runs are incredibly quick, no more than an hour if you make it all the way to the end. To keep you coming back, each run grants an overall game level that unlocks new characters, abilities, and even new attributes for unlocked abilities. With the way the game is designed, every table fits onto one screen without scrolling. Unfortunately, tables get reused fairly frequently, so it can feel homogeneous at times. However, the frenetic energy of constantly creating wild effects helps keep the game engaging with some turn-your-brain-off mayhem and destruction. And that's all I have to say about pinball. I hope I was able to show off some games you found interesting. But what do you think? Are there any pinball games you think I should try out? Thank you so much for watching, and... Wait a second, that's not the outro music! Did you really think I'd end the video here without talking about this game? If you've been paying attention to the soundtrack on my channel, and especially if you've been checking the video descriptions, you might have noticed my obsession with Sonic Spinball. This game has been with me since childhood. I had the cartridge on my hand-me-down Sega Genesis, I unlocked it in Sonic Gems collection, and I even own it on Steam. In a previous video, I suggested that completing Pac-Man World 2 turned me transgender. Well, that was a lie. A bit of a joke, if you will. The actual game that transed my gender is Sonic fucking Spinball. All that time spent sat too close to a CRT trying to get through toxic caves permanently changed something in my brain. And now I have a need for estrogen and an insatiable appetite for the end of capitalism. I love this fucking game, but that doesn't mean I can't see its flaws. Sonic physics were an incredible achievement on the Genesis, and so maybe it's no wonder that the physics aren't completely up to snuff in this pinball engine made by a side team for a quick spin-off game. Sometimes the jank is to your advantage, as Sonic will occasionally teleport to the top of the flippers that he completely missed. Other times you'll be sent careening in odd directions and have no appropriate time to react. The biggest flaw, though, is the screen crunch. As it turns out, 16-bit graphics on a 224-pixel tall screen make it pretty hard to figure out where you're going vertically, meaning that even if you've got some good ball control, you're still largely making blind guesses on where to shoot, and the vertical motion of the camera can make it hard to properly react. Even still, I'd argue that Toxic Caves, Lava Powerhouse, and even the Machine, to an extent, are designed forgivingly enough that you can get through with enough practice. This game has been so ingrained into my head, and its aesthetics have shaped my own personal experience. Toxic Caves is a fantastic zone design for Sonic, and I really wish we'd see more of the Vago Fortress. The Magma Worm and Rexon are my guys. Top tier Badniks. I even once commissioned art of the Magma Worm. Here it is on screen right now. And actually, the person who drew this is currently developing a game called Tricky and the Dreamcaster. Why don't you go wishlist that on Steam and throw her some money on Patreon so she can dedicate more time to finishing it. Heck, if enough of you tell her I sent you, maybe she'll kick a review code my way. One of the complaints I've heard levied against Sonic Spinball is its soundtrack. The music uses what I believe to be default instruments on the Genesis sound chip. Not quite the bespoke sounds of other Sonic games. A lot of people find these songs to be grating, but I'm honestly enamored with the soundtrack. Something about that crunchy overdrive guitar just really does it for me. Toxic Caves is by far the standout track, but I can't say a bad word about any of these tracks. Yes, not even the options menu theme. I really dig these tunes. You know, for as much as I love Spinball, I've never actually taken the time to beat it. As I said before, the physics are, at times, a cruel mistress, so I've never really sat down for a full playthrough. I'd gotten as far as the Machine on some runs, but never saw the end credits. Until I started working on this video, that is. Yeah, since I was gonna profess such a deep love for Sonic Spinball, I figured it was about time I pulled up my skirt and saw through to the end. Since I knew that sometimes things would get out of control, I decided to use an infinite lives code on the Game Genie, but other than that, no save states, no rewinds, no extra help, just me and Spinball till the end. Toxic Caves was a breeze for me to get through. I'd played it so many times that I knew the layout like the back of my hand, and could easily nab all 3 emeralds in one go. Spinball has some interesting design choices when it comes to ball control. By pressing left or right on the directional pad, Sonic is able to have a little bit of directional influence on his trajectory. This is mainly useful for harder to reach spots. Holding inwards can help you make steeper shots, and holding outwards might just be the thing you need to duck under a low obstacle. You can also use this directional influence during descent to aim more towards the flippers. There also seems to be a conscious decision to make cradling the dominant technique. When Sonic is traveling down an in-lane, most of the time, keeping the flipper in the upward position will stop him from moving past, no matter how fast he's going. While this choice makes it incredibly easy to cradle the ball and plan your next shot, it also makes it impossible to perform a hold pass or any other technique for softly transferring the ball from one flipper to the other. This does have the unfortunate side effect of occasionally trapping you on one side of the field, as the only remedy is to shoot in a trajectory that hopefully sends you to the other side. Lava Powerhouse usually gives me some trouble, but this time I was able to get through in one go as well. At this point, I started to wonder if the infinite lives code was even necessary. The set pieces here get a little trickier, particularly the section where you have to properly time a steam burst so that you can Badnik bounce off an oncoming cluck in order to reach a pneumatic tube. If you get a bad cycle, you might end up stuck here for a while. The boss here was kind of strange. Toxic Caves has a poison scorpion with Robotnik's face on it. Here, though, it's 4 Robotnik heads in a jar. Creepy. It was at the machine where I started to run into some trouble, but nothing I couldn't handle within a couple lives. Here, the tables demand some more precise shots, and unfortunately, missing them usually causes a long drop down. Thankfully, the designers were merciful here, as few things outright kill you. There are also some cool set pieces, like the animal prison where you bounce around the locks to save everyone, and earn a Chaos Emerald to boot. The boss you fight here is also the Badnik producing machine, and so it's incredibly satisfying to break it apart. Finally, I came to the Showdown, the final stage. It's aesthetically very interesting. You're climbing up scaffolding and machinery to get to Robotnik's escape rocket and take him down. Unfortunately, this is where the blind shots and substandard physics systems really take their toll. My final recording time for this game came down to 5 hours, and 4 of them were spent on just this single level. There's so many steep and precise shots that you have to make without being able to see where you're going. And you have to do them several times because oftentimes they lead you to a switch you have to press multiple times in order to remove several gates. Sometimes I would get stuck in sections for minutes on end because I happened to get an unlucky shot and be trapped trying to make the precise shot I needed to escape. Other times I'd take a weird bounce or stick to the wall, threading Sonic through the eye of the Outlane and killing him instantly. The trek up to Robotnik has multiple options, but each have their own unique perils. You could take a blind vertical shot upwards and hope to catch a moving hook, bounce off slowly dropping bombs to catch a stationary hook. Or you could get extremely lucky and find yourself on one of the wings where you can spin dash 3 times to break the window, provided that the recoil from cracking the window the first 2 times doesn't send you past the wing and falling back down. Even once you're in the rocket, you've still got a gauntlet ahead. You can't just shoot up the lane and bounce on Robotnik's head. He's got mechanical hands that will grab you and drop you in the timeout corner, as well as windsocks that can slingshot you out the fucking window. If you do get shot out the window, don't try and hold in to influence Sonic's fall because that will most likely cause you to miss everything and fall straight into lava, and then you'll have to start everything over again. You have to make a steep shot to a button underneath Robotnik to switch off these traps. If you miss, you'll hit an afterburner that'll bounce you off at super speed, increasing the chances you'll drain out the bottom and have to climb back up. It doesn't take just one button press to switch everything off. You have to make that shot multiple times. How many times? I don't fucking know. Every time I thought I figured out the rule, I got tricked and Robotnik grabbed me with his claw or bashed me against the fucking window. Once the traps are disabled, then you can damage Robotnik. You have to bounce on him 10 times, but crucially, the traps are on a timer and will come back. And then it's back to the switch and hoping you won't drain and have to make the long climb up or get stuck in a lower section that kills you. And by the way, if you die, you'll have to do it all over again. Open the gates, climb back up, press the switch a random amount of times, over and over again, hoping desperately you won't die this time. Fucking finally. So, what's the verdict on Sonic Spinball? Well, I still like it. The 75% of the game is still pretty solid, and even though the Showdown is the bane of my existence, aesthetically it's pretty fucking cool. I think though that this game is due for a remake. Spinball deserves some flowers, but that's probably not going to happen if it's stuck with screen crunch and the wonky physics it has currently. I don't know. I think 3 decades of advancing screen resolutions and game physics probably could combine to fix the broken parts of this game. Unfortunately, we seem to be in this era where every game by a major company has to be bloated and over-budgeted. But I think a AA remake in line with the existing Alex Kidd remake would do wonders for Spinball. I'd pay full price for it, but most people would probably be happy with a $15 to $20 price point. With all that said, this is where my video ends. I hope my long tangent into pinball video games has been enjoyable. If nothing else, hopefully you saw a game or two that you'll check out. Hey, maybe you'll even drop a few quarters into a physical pinball table the next time you see one. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll come back for the next video. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I need to do some mechanical engineering research. There's a couple pinball table modifications I'd like to make.